And at 10, Robert Williams. Robert Williams was unfortunately the first human to be killed by a robot. Williams, who was an assembly line worker at Ford's plant in Flat Rock, Michigan, was killed on January 25, 1979 when he was gathering spare parts at a storage facility at the plant, alongside a robotic arm that was lifting the heavier items. Williams was killed after the arm of the robot hit him as he climbed up to a shelf to retrieve some casts, and ironically, the robot was supposed to be the one retrieving the casts, but it kept giving wrong information regarding the number of casts left on that shelf, forcing Williams to have to climb up to count them. A jury determined that Williams' death was caused by lax safety measures, including one that should have caused the robot to make warning sounds when around a human, and the victim's family was awarded $10 million in damages. And a number of recommendations were made about improving safety standards when humans were working alongside robots, so that's something at least. And at 9, Kenji Arata. Kenji Arata was thought to be the second person killed by a robot, but the first Japanese man to be killed by one when he died at a Kawasaki Heavy Industries factory in Akashi, Japan in 1981. He was trying to repair the robot at the time of the accident until the robot pinned him against another machine and killed him. Attempts to free Arata from the robot's grip were unsuccessful. The robot had been taken offline for repairs and was separated from the other robots at the factory by a wire mesh fence, and it was supposed to remain shut down whenever anyone opened the door and entered the confines of the fence. Arata had, for some unknown reason, or at least a reason only known to himself, jumped over the fence into the area, therefore not activating the shutdown mechanism. His body rubbed against the machine and inadvertently switched it on, which caused it to come to life and pin him against another machine, which, yeah, yikes. And at 8, Junior Wheel Inc. At Junior Wheel Inc., a motor vehicle parts manufacturing company located in Norton, Ohio, an employee tragically lost their life in 2001 due to an accident involving a robot on the assembly line. As the employee was cleaning up their work area at the end of their shift, they accidentally entered an area of the assembly line where the robots had not yet been deactivated. The robot, mistaking the employee for a machine that needed to be assembled, grabbed them by the neck and suffocated them by pinning them under a wheel rim. While not exactly the same, the idea of being pinned by a robot and suffocating seems like how I'd picture dying from a Springlock failure. Most of this list isn't going to be exact one-for-ones, of course, since Springlocks don't exist in the real world as they do in the games, but suffocation would probably be one of the ways you'd suffer the most if you didn't die instantly from all the robot parts. The Springlock failures from the games being where the mechanism in the suits that holds back the robot parts enough for a human to use it as a costume break and allow the endoskeleton and whatnot to go back to where they'd be in animatronic mode. We haven't seen a true proper Springlock endo, so we can't really be sure about where the parts would go, but if they didn't end up replacing your bones or organs and killing you instantly, I think suffocation would be a main factor behind the death, because I mean, there's gotta be a lot around that area. And at 7, William Afton. I'm pretty sure that we all know this story by now, alright? Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down, he was on his way to immortality, and then once William discovered Remnant though, he started to spiral. He wanted to use it for fuel and to make his life truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lured the possessed animatronics to a back room that they couldn't access and dismantled them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly released the souls of the victims that he had claimed so long ago, and they're ghost kids, so they scared him. He tried to scare them by fleeing into his spring Bonnie suit, which probably also made him feel more powerful, but his haste, coupled with the leaking in the room, because of course he didn't really care about the foundations of the place, causes the Springlock suit to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this, of course, because he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he went on to live that agonizing pain for 30 years, but you know what? He deserved it. And you can't say that this doesn't belong on the list, okay? As the only actual Springlock failure to be confirmed as game canon, some are probably going to consider this the only one that should have been on the list, but hey, I make the rules. And at 6, Dallas police. On July 7, 2016, Micah Johnson carried out an attack in Dallas that resulted in the deaths of 5 police officers and injured 9 more officers and 2 civilians. The attack took place during a protest, and Johnson initially targeted 3 officers, killing them and wounding 3 more officers and 1 civilian. He then fled to El Centro College, where he attacked another officer before barricading himself inside and attacking some more. A standoff ensued, during which the police tried to negotiate with him, who threatened to set off explosives. The police offered him a choice to surrender or face the possibility of being confronted with force, and Johnson did not surrender. Thus, the police ultimately, using a robot equipped with a brick of C4, to get inside and, let's say, deal with the event. It did damage the robot though, but this marked the first time a police department in the US actually used a bomb-laden robot for reasons other than disarming a bomb. Yeah. Halfway through into number 5, Joshua Brown. Joshua Brown was the first person to be killed in a self-driving car accident. On May 7th of 2016, while driving a Tesla Model S through Williston, Florida, the car was unable to distinguish between an 18-wheel tractor trailer and the bright sky. As a result, the Tesla collided with the trailer, tearing off the roof of the car, and then crashed through 2 fences and a pole before coming to a stop. Tesla initially tried to deflect responsibility for the accident, pointing out that this was the first accident involving the Model S in 130 million miles of driving, which was below the industry average of 94 million miles, but Tesla also emphasized that the autopilot system was not perfect and required drivers to keep their hands on the steering wheel. However, investigations by the National Transport Safety Board revealed that Brown had his hands on the steering wheel for only 25 seconds out of the 37-minute trip, and neither he nor the autopilot applied the brakes. The airbags did not deploy until after the car had left the road and hit some trees, which I think is absolutely terrifying as well, but considering that the police found a micro SD card containing a Harry Potter movie at the accident scene, the driver of the truck claiming that Brown was watching a Harry Potter movie at the time of the accident, and 2 laptops being found in the car, this seems like more user error than a fault of the vehicle. In at 4, Devin. The story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book, revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts from their class, and they aren't really popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrived at their school, they tried to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time, Devin ends up growing jealous because of that, since Kelsey has everything he wants. So, in an act of revenge or in an attempt to gain control, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's and trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. To try to humble him, I guess? I don't know. Why do you know what a Springlock suit does? Do you just chill in it for an hour or 2? I don't know. Why do you know about this? Either way, the plan goes horribly wrong, and after getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, and it causes the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic, pull on the ground, all the grisly scenes that you'd expect from this. Devin and Mick then leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So, a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth and snap! Haha, the Springlocks fail again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hands stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing that the body in the suit had black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. That's the only other Springlock failure that we actually know happened, so yeah, I'm putting it on the list. Getting close to the end in number 3, Lenco Inc. Lenco Inc. is a company which makes the plastic products for a number of industries, including the clear plastic cases used in the packaging of CDs. CDs are those they're like Blu-ray discs that you would get your dad for Christmas, but for music and not as durable. And the case is the stuff that people were cutting up to make hologram projectors out of with their phones. You just place it on the screen. Yeah. Unfortunately though, one of the robotic arms used in this manufacturing process killed an employee at the factory back in 2007. According to accident investigators, the arm of the robot malfunctioned and moved unexpectedly, striking a male worker in the head and ribs, causing severe blunt force trauma. It was reported that the employee survived for 2 weeks in the local hospital, but eventually succumbed to the serious injuries. My brain to draw crazy parallels between that and Crying Child from FNAF 4, who had severe head trauma and died of his injuries in the hospital later on, which sends a chill down my spine, because that's yikes. But ultimately, in at number 2, Ramji Lal. In 2015, a robot at the SKH Metals factory in Manesia, India, caused the death of a 24-year-old Ramji Lal, an employee at the factory. The robot, which was used to lift and weld metal parts together, accidentally stabbed Lal in the abdomen while he was attempting to adjust a mispositioned metal sheet. Lal was taken to the hospital after the accident, but he later died from internal bleeding caused by the crushed ribs and abdomen. Despite initial reports suggesting that Lal may have also been electrocuted, an autopsy found no evidence of this and was ultimately determined that he died from the injuries sustained in the accident with the robot. However, the police reportedly stood by the death by electrocution, which is odd, and is way too close to the cops from FNAF, ignoring just the animatronics being compared to human corpses. it wasn't a thing. I don't know why they were doing that, but again, it's obviously not the same thing, but definitely some interesting parallels that at least my brain can see. You probably can't, but you know what, I'm weird. And finally, and at number 1, Anna Maria Vital. In 2009, a malfunctioning robot at Golden State Foods in Los Angeles resulted in the death of Anna Maria Vital, a 41-year-old employee at the company. Golden State Foods was a major supplier for McDonald's, reported that Vital had been attempting to remove a box that was stuck in the machinery on the factory floor when the accident occurred. After freeing the box, the robot grabbed her, causing severe crushing injuries. Despite efforts by her colleagues to free her, Vital's injuries were too severe and she passed away a few moments later. Given that this was a death at the hands of a robot, crushing someone, being grabbed by an animatronic, and related to a fast food chain, this was extremely, frighteningly similar, at least in my brain, to the stories that we see coming from the FNAF games, especially in regards to Elizabeth Afton, who gets grabbed and crushed by Baby at Circus Baby's Pizza World, which is basically FNAF's McDonald's. And at 10, Wanda Holbrook. In March 2015, a robot at the Ventura Iona Mains plant in Michigan caused the death of Wanda Holbrook, a 57-year-old maintenance specialist who worked at the plant. The plant, which produced car parts, was divided into sections, with robots from one section supposedly unable to enter another. However, one robot did cross into a section where Wanda was working and picked up a trailer part, which it then dropped on her head, killing her instantly. The robot was attempting to load the trailer part onto a fixture that had already contained another trailer part, which should have been impossible, due to the fact that a fixture can only hold one trailer part at any given time. Wanda's husband William filed charges against the 5 companies involved in the production of the robot, and I'm pretty sure he won. But skull crushing, come on, that's too close. And at 9, unnamed man. In 2015, there was a tragic incident at a Volkswagen plant in Germany in which a man was killed by a robot. The victim was part of a team that was setting up the robot, which was responsible for picking up components and assembling them into car parts. The robot was normally kept in a cage, and it was while the man was working on it inside the cage, and that's when the incident occurred. According to reports, the robot grabbed the man and pinned him against some metal sheets, causing serious injuries. The man later died as a result of those injuries. In a statement, Volkswagen said that they believed the incident was caused by human error, and it's worth noting that another worker who was inside the cage with the victim at the time was not harmed, but they weren't really sure. Or at least, of course, they're gonna say it was human error. And at 8, Oerlikon. In 2007, 9 South African soldiers were killed and 14 were injured when an anti-aircraft weapon, the Oerlikon GDF-005, malfunctioned during a training exercise at the Army's Combat Training Center in Northern Cape. The weapon, which is capable of firing, targeting, and engaging hostiles without human intervention, and can even reload automatically, jammed and exploded before firing 250 rounds of high explosive 33mm rounds from its 2 barrels at the soldiers. It's believed that the accident may have been caused by either a software or mechanical failure, and according to Richard Young, CEO of a defense company, this type of malfunction is not uncommon, and he's witnessed similar incidents with automatic anti-aircraft weapons in the past. But fortunately, no one was killed in those instances. But if that's an issue, and not an uncommon one, maybe you should fix it. And at 7, the Alvy machine. While working at a meatpacking plant in Greeley, Colorado, a construction worker met a tragic end while installing an access catwalk. One of the larger machines at the plant, the Alvy, which was used to move boxed meat from a higher conveyor belt to a lower one, had not been properly turned off while the contractor was working. The heavy arm of the robot knocked him off his feet, and he then fell 10 feet onto a conveyor belt below, where his head was crushed by heavy machinery, him instantly, yet again with the head crushing. Jeez. Or as the accident report so eloquently puts it, quote, "The Alvy machine was not de-energized nor locked out, and employee number 1 wore no fall protection. While employee number 1 was connecting the platform to the catwalk adjacent to, in, and around the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car of the Alvy machine, the car struck the construction worker. Employee number 1 fell approximately 10 feet, getting caught in the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car, and traveling under the car, which crushed employee number 1's head and killed him as the car reached its first resistance, that being the next angle iron joint of the car pathway." End quote. Gotta love the numbers. Jeez. And at 6, mystery incident. Alright, so this one's actually FNAF. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This one comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guy dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures. Some interpreted this as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside inside one suit failing at the same time, or multiple suits failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. However, there are multiple holes to this theory. Mostly the design of the shadow animatronics is not like the Springlock suits. Shadow Bonnie is very much modeled after Toy Bonnie, and Freddy is more like the Freddy or Golden Freddy from FNAF 1 and not like the Fredbear we see in FNAF 4. There are also people that say if this happened, then the robots would have been decommissioned, but as we've seen from this list and the last part, that wouldn't necessarily happen. And also, if you like what we're doing here, then firstly, seek help, but also, be sure you hit like and subscribe, because I yell about various video game series all the time, and yes, it is various ones now, we're not just doing FNAF, I promise. Halfway through into number 5, William Afton. Again. I say again, even though technically William was on the last list, and some may consider this the same thing, but I mean in the context of a part 2, it makes sense to say again. But anyway, could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suit like we see in FNAF 3? It actually is possible, which explains why I say again. And it certainly appears like it could be the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired? Could he have been the victim of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, since we hear of the unfortunate incident at the sister location? Could it have been William? There are plenty of people that it could have been, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time at least. But with William continuing to put the suit on afterwards, when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that this theory is unlikely, but it's still possible. William is a pretty dumb guy. I've said that a lot. In at 4, Volkswagen. A contractor at another Volkswagen production plant in Germany also died as a result of an incident involving a robot, according to the automaker. The incident occurred on a Monday at the plant in Bonneville, located 100 kilometers north of Frankfurt. The victim, a 22-year-old man, was part of a team that was setting up a stationary robot, and it grabbed and crushed him against a metal plate. According to Volkswagen spokesperson Heiko Hillwing, initial conclusions indicated that it was a human error that caused the incident, again, rather than a problem with the robot itself. But the robot, which can be programmed to perform various tasks in the assembly process, normally operates within a confined area at the plant, handling auto parts and manipulating them as well. Other people were there, but they weren't injured, so again, it's all up in the air. Getting close to the end of number 3, Sodesia Sterling Heights. On December 15th, 2012, an employee at Sodesia Sterling Heights, a US company that manufactures car parts, was killed while working inside a robot work cell. The 38-year-old male employee was inside the cell when the gates closed, and he was struck from behind by a transfer robot, which crushed his chest and back. The company, which specializes in producing heavier car parts such as chassis components, used powerful robot arms to lift and maneuver these parts around the plant. In this incident, the machine should have been powered down, but it moved unexpectedly and pinned the worker against the wire of the cage, causing the fatal injuries, which is unfortunate and really makes me question why we use robots at all. But ultimately, in number 2, robot surgeons. Robot-assisted surgery is a form of minimally invasive surgery that allows surgeons to perform complex procedures through small incisions or remotely using a computer console. I had one of these used on me when I was getting my appendix out. These robots have been hailed as a major advancement in 21st century medicine because they offer increased precision and control for the surgeon, which can lead to improved patient outcomes. However, it is important to note that like any medical procedure, robot-assisted surgery carries some risks. A study in the United States found that surgical robots may be linked to the deaths of 144 people between 2008 and 2013. The causes of these deaths varied, but included system errors that caused delays in the procedure and instances of machinery falling into patients' open wounds. Despite these risks, robot-assisted surgery is still widely used in the medical field because it offers many potential benefits to both patients and surgeons. For example, it can allow for less trauma to the patient during the surgery, faster recovery times, and less scarring. But overall, the use of surgical robots in the medical field is a complex issue that requires careful consideration for both the surgeon and the patient for, risks and benefits, and either way, it's up to you. And finally, in at number 1, Regina Elsa. In June 2016, 20-year-old Regina Elsa was killed in a robot-related accident just 2 weeks before her wedding. The incident occurred at Asian USA, a South Korean-owned plant in Cusseta, Alabama that produced parts for Hyundai and Kia vehicles. On the day of the accident, Elsa and some co-workers were attempting to repair a faulty robot, despite the fact that they weren't supposed to do so. They had tried to reach the maintenance department, but no one answered their calls, so they decided to fix the robot themselves, probably out of fear that they would get in trouble if the robot wasn't working. Unfortunately, the robot suddenly restarted and pushed Elsa against another machine, causing serious injuries. She was taken to the East Alabama Medical Center and airlifted to UAB the hospital, but she died the following morning. An investigation into the incident revealed that Agent USA had committed several safety violations in order to maximize profits, and in fact, the US Department of Labor had fined the company and 2 staffing agencies $2.7 million for 27 safety violations just 2 weeks before this incident. The inquiry also found that Agent USA overworked its employees and encouraged them to repair the faulty machines, which explains why they were doing it. And it's 10 Springtrap. Craftix Gaming's YouTube channel features a video of a real Springtrap costume, and honestly, it's terrifying. Springtrap is the main animatronic of FNAF 3, and this costume is freaking nuts. This is a very good costume, and while Springtrap may not be the scariest animatronic, he's not someone I'm gonna want to tussle with. However, I want to talk about what's going on with this character because, my guy, you dressed up as a possessed man who is inhabiting an animatronic, unable to die but still decaying. You are quite literally dressing up as a serial killer. Like in the FNAF world, if you dressed up like this, it'd be like if you dressed up as Ted Bundy in this world. And if you want to be in FNAF that badly, okay, don't dress as the serial killer, is all I'm saying. And I know that's ironic coming from me, okay, given what I'm dressed like at this moment. Do I look like I want to be in Five Nights at Freddy's? Have I made things seem like I want to be in this world? Because if I have, you need to watch more of these videos, okay? Also, I'm dressed up as the purple guy who makes no appearance in the actual FNAF world, okay? There is no actual, okay, there is the actual purple guy, but he doesn't look like this, okay? The purple guy that I am dressed as is not actually a real version of the serial killer in their world, okay? I don't want to be in that world. Those doors aren't it, Chief. They ain't it. No, the doors ruin it for me. And a 9, Scrap Baby. Scrap Baby is a creepy animatronic. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Scrap Baby is by far creepier than the normal baby animatronic, and this costume certainly does it justice. Animatronics are a difficult costume to really make, since we're people, and unfortunately do not have robotic limbs for the most part. Or if we do, we typically try to make it look like a real leg instead of a robot leg. But a Scrap Baby is even more difficult since, you know, it's a scrap animatronic, and it has a giant freaking claw in its hand. Scrap Baby is a very damaged and recycled version of Baby with a realistic reddish orange kind of bodysuit, light blue stuff, yellow pigtails, and okay, she wears an orange top with red frills, and it's just super damaged, okay? Like this, she's very damaged. Mentally and physically. Yet somehow Instagram user Gaius Bazzani was able to recreate this in an awesome way. So, very well done. And at 8, Vanny. With Vanny being an upcoming villain and already one of the most popular characters in the series, there are bound to be plenty of costumes of her. However, this one from Rojito Uwu on Twitter is probably the most accurate and creepiest one I've seen. Vanny being a reluctant follower does in a way technically make this a glitch trap cosplay as well, but we won't really talk about that because that's not what counts. This costume is probably the most realistic costume on this list because, well, Vanny in the games ended up making her own suit and is just a human inside, whereas like the other characters like Scrap Baby or Springtrap are animatronics as well as sometimes part human, be it soul or another body. And Rojito's costume follows the exact same concept as Vanny, just a person who makes their own suit, which makes this potentially one of the scariest things of all. I mean, technically it's not the same thing because they're not possessed and enticed to make it by the person possessing their brain, but I mean, it's close enough. I mean, they could be possessed for all we know. I don't know. And at 7, Ennard. Costumes don't really have to be elaborate to be scary. Take for example this Ennard cosplay by YouTube channel Skywarped33. The entire endoskeleton spaghetti bits aren't there, but the lights and sounds make it even more frightening than you'd think. The face also opens up, and I think that we all know how I feel about animatronics who can move their face at will at this point, okay? It's not something that should be allowed. However, even without all the parts and the eyes, this Ennard cosplay is not something I would want to run into in a dark alley, especially not after that goddamn vent repair minigame. That caused me to have some serious issues, okay? It's rough, okay? I used to like spaghetti. Man, like now what am I supposed to do? And at 6, Nightmare Freddy. Nightmare Freddy is one of the most iconic versions of the character, even if there are only 3 games that feature this guy, those being FNAF 4, Ultimate Custom Night, and FNAF ER. However, this Nightmare Freddy cosplay is insane, and in my opinion, would have been our frontrunner for the Coupe de France cosplay competition that it was for back in 2017. The video was uploaded by YouTube channel Gorgon Geek, and this guy plays the robot thing really well. But as soon as he drops that microphone, he goes into terror mode, and it's certainly something to behold. I would have enjoyed it if he had like the little frettles with him, but the moving mouth is certainly a nice touch, especially with the attempted jump scares they do in the video, because he just goes like ah and stuff. Like, imagine if this guy had started twerking though. At one point I thought he was going to. He went to pick up the mic and I thought he was just going to start busting it, but no. I think that would have won them gold though. If you get this out of here. If you had started twerking, my guy, you would have won. I don't know what place you came in, but if you'd twerked, you would have won. Halfway through into number 5, Buff Helpy. Okay, this may not be a cosplay, but Buff Helpy is probably the most disturbing non-cosplay character I can really include on this list. If you didn't already know, Buff Helpy is a meme that was created on a Daco FNAF meme review video and has ever since been haunting him and the rest of the community. Don't get me wrong, okay? I love Helpy. But this Buff Helpy meme has generated a whole load of Buff FNAF character ideas, and it terrifies me now. There's nowhere is safe from these creations. If you look up any character, you're bound to find a buff version of them at some point. You just need to scroll down enough, okay? It's one of the rules of the internet, okay? Same thing with what happens to Chica. But no matter what, this is just some psychological torment that I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, actually. But I'm talking about it because, like, it's Halloween, and the world is currently my worst enemy, so if I have to look at this thing on a regular basis when I'm writing these goddamn lists, you have to look at it for this one number, okay? One number. That's all I ask. And at 4, Nightmare. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Nightmare is the scariest animatronic from the games, hands down. This guy will get me every time, and it's one of those reasons I just refuse to play FNAF 4. The other is Nightmare Fredbear, but at least I don't have to deal with them in real life, right? They're only a nightmare character created in the mind of a coma patient in a video game, right? Well, guess again. Thanks to Zombunny Creations on Amino Apps, we get both Nightmare and Nightmare Fredbear. Ironically, Nightmare Fredbear is played by their twin sister. And I mean, it's ironic because, well, Elizabeth Afton is sometimes presumed to be Crying Child's twin sister. Anyway, these absolute hulking costumes are going to make me drop a load of my pants. Like, if I saw this in real life, holy crap. Like, imagine actually living in a house that is at least kind of laid out like the one from FNAF 4. And then your kids want to play a prank on you. My grandparents' house is kind of laid out like this. It's not as simple as just 2 halls on either side of the room, but like they have the master bedroom does have 2 doors. So theoretically, that's something that can be reenacted there. I don't want to do that. No. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Glitch Trap. We know my issue with Glitch Trap, alright, okay? We know that I just want to watch William Afton burn and then leave him there permanently, hence why I'm wearing the costume. But I want him to actually be in hell and then stay there while we move on with another killer or something else in the series. Please, for God's sake, Scott. I hate this always comes back thing that he's got going on. And despite being dressed as Purple Guy, I want William dead. So, when I saw this frighteningly realistic looking Glitch Trap costume, my nerves hit an all-time high. I think the sheer simplicity of the Glitch Trap suit is certainly something that makes this a creepy costume, since the stitches are very accentuated here. They're very clear on this version. Like, it might be like the higher contrast than like the actual suit in the games, because like you know that they're there, but you can't really tell. But like, either way, this is creepy. Plus, again, it's another version of William goddamn Afton who already haunts my nightmares. So what the heck? Zombunny Creations, again, on Twitter this time. Why do you gotta do this to me? Huh? Why? Bro? Then ultimately in at number 2, Twisted Freddy. Holy ever living hell, okay? This is a horrific masterpiece that I could only hope to achieve. This full body Twisted Freddy costume is probably one of the most horrific FNAF costumes I've ever seen. Especially because I believe that the Twisted animatronics are probably the scariest version of the animatronics present in the novels, and a solid tie for the scariest animatronics alongside the nightmare ones from FNAF 4. This is some pretty damn expert craftsmanship if you ask me though, okay? This is a full body suit and it blows my freaking mind. Like, look at this. It would weigh a ton and it would definitely need a hander, especially if my clumsy was the one walking around in it, but it straight up looks like if Freddy Krueger were an animatronic. And I mean, I'm not mad about it in the slightest, but like, it's still freaking creepy. So well done, DeRegular Sauce, who is the Twitter user behind this glorious creation. Well done. And finally, in at number 1, Withered Bonnie. This Withered Body cosplay is probably the scariest damn FNAF cosplay I've ever seen. This is incredible and comes from the YouTube user The Nick of Time. At first I legitimately thought that this was CGI instead of an actual costume, but lo and behold, it was just an insane costume. Glowing eyes and seemingly actually aluminum parts, and a chest that opens up that you can push it out with your other hand, which is honestly actually a decent scare. Frankly, in the video I was kind of taken aback when they did that, so in real life I'm sure that it results in at least a bit of a jump scare, but this kind of thing always impresses the hell out of me, because like the closest I've come to making a full costume was when I helped someone work on one of theirs. But that's the closest I've gotten. Hey, I made like a lightning bolt for the chest, and I made paper cup, like bracers, that's about it. This is hella impressive to me. I don't understand how people do this. In a 10 mini arenas. Why are the mini arenas so goddamn creepy? They're not scary per se, but they literally tear Ballora to pieces. So there's something there at the very least. The mini arenas are basically the robotic versions of those kids in your neighborhood that are always screaming or causing trouble at literally all hours of the day. And then they go to a nearby school, so you're never really rid of them and you gotta deal with them constantly. Or they run down the street when you knock at the door to see their older brother, and then their family is so damn lazy that you have to take off after him. So you end up chasing a toddler that's in nothing but a diaper down the street at 11 in the morning, catch him in front of your other friend's house, and then have the kid pulling at your hair and punching and kicking you all the way back to his house, and then people realize that you're not related. And then you don't even get a thank you for doing the parent's job. That's the moment I knew how Spider-Man felt when the police don't thank him for fighting the dude with 4 robot arms so that they don't have to. But that's a totally fictitious scenario that would be too ridiculous to happen in real life. Look, I know his older brother watches these videos, okay? So yeah, Roshane was a piece of work. In at 9, Circus Baby. Let's start off with one of the deadliest animatronics in the game. Baby has an official death count of 2, the first being Elizabeth, William's daughter, and the other being Henry as we see in FNAF World. But it's not just the ability to kill that's crazy, it's the incredibly advanced technology inside the animatronic that's really impressive here. The ability to contain a whole child-grabbing claw and then also a containment chamber for said kid is pretty damn impressive. But also the ability to use pins on her body to change her appearance is also pretty insane. Not to mention all of her other features like ice cream dispensing and balloon inflating at her fingertips, but all of this is again overshadowed by the absolute carnage that Baby has the ability to cause. And honestly, that's probably just the tip of the iceberg, not even including the Fazbear Frights version that can change her appearance into an actual person. Oh no, I guess that's the normal novels. Whatever. It's weird and scary. In at 8, Nightmare Animatronics. While not the epitome of horror, the Nightmare Animatronics are certainly not the nicest of fellows. Not only that, but they are in fact not real. They're an illusion, which makes them even more terrifying if you ask me. Or like, illusion is not really the proper word because they're in a dream. Anyway, not only do these creations cause horrific visions to anyone who knows about them, but they also kill a coma patient. Crying Child, as we know, is in the hospital in FNAF 4, making this game entirely just a nightmare. However, getting caught by one of these animatronics causes him so much stress that he actually dies, which is insane when you look at it like that, okay? These are so scary to him that it gives him a heart attack, or just makes his heart stop working, or something. And at 7, the Scooper. Now, I know that you may be mad and think that this is a stupid point, but hear me out, alright? The Scooper may seem like a weird but kind of normal thing, at least by FNAF standards, but with the blueprint revealing how this thing actually works, it's incredible. It's such a feat of technology. It can inject whatever it ends up scooping with Remnant without really having any injection points, and its Remnant is a molten metal possessed by souls. And then, assuming my theory about Michael being a robot is wrong, it can then, by doing so, keep a person alive after removing their insides, replacing it with robot parts, and then those robotic parts leaving that body still leaves the flesh suit viable. So in essence, it just makes that person a walking case of flesh. Unless it didn't actually remove anything and instead just opened him up and then let the innards get in. But like, he flattens down like a pancake. Dude had no bones. That's impressive, but also terrifying. That would require some serious juice. Dude's juicing. And at 6, Fetch. Fetch was introduced in the Fazbear Frights books and is a robotic dog made by Fazbear Inc. It gets a little too loving. So much so that it will actually brutally murder the girl you want to ask to homecoming. So, sorry Peter, but at least you won't have to feel bad about sending her dad to prison. Either way, a robotic dog that will kill anything you love is absolutely horrifying and should be taken care of as soon as possible, if you know what I mean. Like, this is why you spay and neuter your animals, people. But in all seriousness, could you imagine if this was a real thing? Like if you randomly started getting texts from a robotic dog that followed you home that instead of bringing you dead birds or squirrels, instead brings you the bloody arm of your crush. Yeah, that sounds like something the Winchesters would fight. Or that it would be on some other really weird CW show or some crime show or something, okay? Yeah, no thanks. Ignoring the Dean-inspired look today. Halfway through into number 5, Twisted Ones. Well, the Twisted Ones certainly do seem to live up to their name. The Twisted animatronics are these horrifically disfigured creatures that get no love from their mother like an ugly duckling. The thing is though, they don't grow into swans. Instead, they use another bit of technology that I'll get into later to disguise themselves. They also dig deep into the ground and wait until the middle of the night to crawl out and take kids who wander away from their mommies. Yeah, this legit sounds like an urban legend that parents would tell their kids to make sure that they were home before dark. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about them. Although the whole crawling into a hole and then only coming out at night thing, I wish I could do that. I don't like dirt. And at 4, human robots. This is something I'm sure that some people won't think is scary. Maybe they'll think it's scary good, but hey, the fact that there are robots that are actually able to look like humans is horrifying. Like, that is such a scary thing. In the original FNAF novel trilogy, it's revealed that Charlotte, the main protagonist of the books, is in fact one in a series of robots meant to allow her to grow up properly after being killed at an early age. But not only is she a robot, apparently she's also baby. At least that's what I remember reading about, okay? In the books, Charlotte's robot, or like the adult version of her robot, was also able to look like normal circus baby thanks to the pins on her body that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, that's the epitome of horror. Who in their right mind would think of a concept like that? And if it was real, we would all be goners, okay? This is like the fembots from Austin Powers. That's basically what this is. And then all the down bads would be trying to give it to them, and then they'd get themselves scooped. I'm surprised it didn't happen in the novels, since that one guy had his gears turning, if you know what I mean, although he wasn't actually a robot. And if you do know what I mean, can you please explain it to me? Because I'm not even, I understand what's going on at this point. My brain is all mush thinking about this circle of logic going on. I don't want to, no. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Lonely Freddy. Lonely Freddy already, in a way, kind of has a parallel in our world. I mean, like, kinda. It's like the trope where someone becomes your friend and then becomes more like you and then tries to take over your life. Is that a thing? Is that actually a thing? I don't know. Maybe I dreamt about it ages ago and then forgot, or maybe it was like an episode of a show. I think it might have been a show. I don't know. But like, also just plain old identity theft is kind of another version of Lonely Freddy, just not as advanced. A Lonely Freddy was introduced in the Fazbear Frights books, and it's basically meant to explain what psychic friend Fredbear is, maybe, or at least that's what some people assume. But it's a robot that steals your body and then traps your consciousness into its original robot body. What the ever-loving hell? Why is that a thing? Why is that so goddamn terrifying? Especially in concept, right? But if it was actually real, what the absolute living would I do, okay? It's easy to say that we could just avoid them, okay, but we wouldn't know that they existed, okay? We would just be lonely kids dreaming about having friends, and then all of a sudden a robot wants to be our friend, okay? It would be vicious, and it would definitely have gotten me when I was a kid. Okay, I really wanted a friend, but especially a friend that was a robot. That would have been sick, man. But ultimately, in number 2, reality-altering discs. I mention these every chance I get because of the implications, alright? They're insane. If you don't already know, the original FNAF novel trilogy revealed that the Twisted animatronics used discs that transformed how others saw them, basically creating an illusionary appearance using sound emitting from the disc that messed with your brainwaves or whatever, however they explained it in the FNAF books. However, the mere existence of these discs discs puts everything we know about the series into question. How do we know if anything we see is real? FNAF 1 had us hallucinate different things, like it's me, along with multiple news clippings and posters, and if one of my other theories is right, even Golden Freddy himself. So like, what if that was just the discs? And if it was, what if other things were changed by the discs as well? Like, is that really what the pizzeria looked like? Do the animatronics have more of a rotten appearance than we see in the game? I don't know. And I don't like not knowing, alright? Unless it's about the creation of the universe, in which case, that is... I don't need to like see Cthulhu and die, you know? And finally, into number 1, the Springlocks. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world has ever invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside a costume is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers an hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't really complain about it. And actually, you know what? Yes, we can. And while yes, cars have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit, okay? That's an incredible feat of technology. Yet, it's also terrifying because of the same reasons in game. Okay, someone can dress in it and then pretend to be a robot and then clamp down on you in any second. As it has multiple times before, okay? It can trap you. It could, if it were real, do everything we learn about from the books and the games. And it would make your life hell for fun. Especially when it can be a robot. Okay, and then the man who's once inside of it can like smile knowing that all your friends can't fight off a huge hunk of metal, you know? Like superpowers, basically. Oh, also, just saying, Springlocks as they're presented in the games aren't real, okay? The real life Springlocks are just locks on springs. It's like your deadbolt, but on a spring. That's basically what it is. So just don't even come at me in the comments. I know you were thinking it. Don't.
Number 10, William Afton and the leak. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to Springlock failures is William Afton. William Afton from the games, that is. In this version of the story, William Afton basically got destroyed by these Springlocks. He was fully impaled by the Springlocks in the Springlock Bonnie suit after trying to escape the ghosts of his victims. He thought hiding inside the Spring Bonnie suit would protect him, but hey, he was wrong. It turned out that there was water on the floor which when he touched caused the Springlocks in the suit to loosen, or water that possibly dripped down from him, and also his breath. This caused the Springlocks to malfunction, they fully released and impaled William, ultimately causing his death. However, this is William Afton, so even dying would not keep him dead forever. It'd only keep him dead for a little while. We later learned that one of the vengeful spirits, or possibly a pair of them, cursed William to experience the pain that they had felt, thereby extending his life indefinitely, no matter the pain he suffered. Which is how William Afton can be a shambling corpse, but also somehow still alive. And friends, before I move on to this next spot on the list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, and if you love FNAF 2, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, Bite of 87. Well, we don't really know for sure if this is correct, as the Bite of 87 is still not fully confirmed in terms of all the details. It is possible that it was the result of a Springlock failure. It's believed that the Bite of 87 led to the fatal injury of a guest when the frontal lobe of their brain was badly damaged in an incident related to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Now, based on the Bite of 83, we can imagine it may have been a similar incident where someone basically stuck their head inside an animatronic and kinda had it chomped. Or it could have been something else that happened. But either way, if it was similar to the Bite of 83, or even if it wasn't, it seems likely that a Springlock failure could be possible, as the suits may have still been in use at that time, as the suits may still have been in use at the time that this terrible incident occurred. Now, some might say they stopped being used after the Bite of 83, but with a timeline this wonky, I don't think we have anything that is 100% concrete conclusive yet in regards to when Springlock suits stopped being used across the board forever. Also, I feel like there are times maybe where they were like, let's stop using them for like a bit, and then we think we fixed them, and then they're still, dysfunctional. Because that's just how Springlock suits are. I would never even go near one of those things. Death trap. Number 8. Can you Springlock a ghost? To answer this question, we could turn to the Fazbear Frights book 135 AM, and one of the stories within its pages, titled The New Kid. In this story, a young boy named Devin befriends the new kid at school, Kelsey. However, while his other friend Mick seems to really like Kelsey, and at first, Devin does too, eventually Devin becomes jealous of Kelsey. When Kelsey seemingly ditches them one day when they're all hanging out, Devin decides to get revenge on him for doing this. Finding a new hangout spot, a now now abandoned former Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Devin dares Kelsey to put on a Springlock suit. Kelsey does this and begins dancing around, but doing so, of course, triggers the Springlocks within the suit to release, seemingly impaling him. While initially Devin and Mick leave Kelsey there for dead, Devin eventually returns to investigate, with Mick wondering if Kelsey might still be alive. When Devin does return, he doesn't see Kelsey in the suit, but later spots a black-haired ghostly figure within. It is implied that Kelsey is some kind of spirit of vengeance, possibly one of the spirits from the game lore that possessed Golden Freddy. And if you're wondering how we know that, well, later in the book we see that Kelsey is alive and well, seemingly after he seemed to have been springlocked, so either he has superpowers or he a ghost. Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant than his video game counterpart, at least when it comes to dodging springlocks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting springlocked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the springlocks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found at the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the fourth closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being springlocked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence. Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the springlocks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying to do. This time when the springlocks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini arenas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini arenas jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini arenas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the springlocks back up enough, you will trigger the springlocks release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts which are released by those springlocks. Yikes. Number 5. The Fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible springlock victim. The consequences of this employee's springlock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a Springlock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that Springlock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The Fate of RWQFSFASXC. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the Springlocks failing, but so is the shadowy figure of RWQFSFASXC. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the Springlock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the Springlock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the Springlock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits? Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. Number 3. Payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get springlocked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a Springlock failure from the inside, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the bite of 83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a Springlock suit failing. So, while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, Devin also likely died. Number 2, the bite of 83. Definitely among the most memorable Springlock failures is the bite of 83. Now some of you are gonna say, Amanda, this is not a Springlock failure. There was no one in that suit that we know of, which sure. But still, it's a Springlock suit and it failed, so I'm counting it. Anyways, I feel like the bite of 83 hasn't been fully confirmed really at all, but many theorize it to be true. Many theorize that our theory is true, that we have so far, because this is all we got, alright? We grab all these little Easter eggs and then we do our best to try to figure out what's going on in the narrative. Now, why do we believe that this could even be a Springlock failure? Well, one, the crying child was crying when he was held up to give Fredbear a kiss, which many theorize is the reason the jaws of the animatronic bear clamped down, as a result of the tears making the gears wet and causing a Springlock malfunction. 2, we have been led to believe that Fredbear was a Springlock suit, so that's also why people suspect that the bite of 83 could also be a Springlock malfunction. Number 1, multiple. While Shadow Freddy and RWQFS-FASXC may have been debunked as Springlock failure victims by Scott himself, this theory didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, many thought that they were among those generally referred to in FNAF 3 during Phone Guy's recording for night number 4. Here, Phone Guy mentions that the Springlock suits are being discontinued as a result of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures. Which, I gotta say, it makes sense to me too, because I'm like, what were all these multiple Springlock failures, what does that entail, and how many were there? Oh boy. I can't even believe that there have been that many Springlock failures. Honestly, these suits should have been decommissioned a long time ago. That's for sure. I know I would not get in one, I would not go near one, they dangerous.
And at 10, designer. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions. By William Afton. This kinda goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that's not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby and her comrades, we know that they were made in order to kill, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to assume that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. But honestly, if William made the Fun Times with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks, you get me? And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal, bars, cogs, gears, and chains and more into the same space as your body would be made with pure intentions, you should stop watching these videos and go to a therapist. Seriously, I have a number. In at 9, moisture sensitive. One of the things that I find to be the absolute dumbest thing about not only these damned suits but also the FNAF series in general is how stupid it is that the Springlock mechanisms inside the Springlock suits fail with moisture. Sure, it explains why William gets spring-locked because the room was dripping and whatever, the ceiling was leaking, and it makes everyone confused with Crying Child because he was crying. Despite that not being a Springlock failure, everyone thought it was because he was crying and, moisture. But in actual practice, that is a horribly flawed mechanic. Like, if me breathing and sweating is going to make the metal bits snap on me, why would I do it in a hot robotic suit? That seems like a horrible and stupid idea. Like, yes, okay, put me in a hot and sweaty environment that gets me killed if it gets wet. Well, that's not a liability at all. I get sweaty wearing my freaking Doctor Strange costume, okay? Imagine a giant suit full of metal, okay? That would also be heavy as hell to walk around in too, only making the sweating worse. In at 8, no bonus. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the Foam Guy tapes from FNAF 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting Springlocked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get spring-locked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. And it's 7 required. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters, for the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. You know, they are the ones who make you the money, so, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work, and if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitch Trap in Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against, so. Especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And its 6 implications. Now, while the term Springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual FNAF mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a spring lock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page, so it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that Springlocks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the Springlock failure was real, I think the implications of, like, all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like, it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real FNAF restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You want to know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be springlocked. What? Why? Why would you want to be springlocked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be springlocked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least, like, as far as, like, actually could happen goes, I think, at least, okay? Because, like, a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this. Stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor. And for Afton, I talked about how the implications would apply to like how everything in FNAF would have happened in real life if one of these was real, but one of the worst implications would be that Afton was real. This man has caused me enough pain and suffering already. I don't need him to be like an actual person, especially considering how Springtrap would be set loose next year. And then everything after it would happen. This channel would probably be a true crime channel and not a gaming channel. I'd probably have tried proving it myself and maybe even become a PI so that I can do so. But straight up, this man has already caused me enough grief and suffering and loss and tears of pain at night in my life, and it's made me lose enough of it already to him. So yeah, him being real would just be the worst thing that I can imagine for me. However, that's only if the Springlock failure thing was also real. There are worse things for people in the FNAF universe though, not in real life, such as in at 3, paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a Springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn, someone dying in your building is one thing. Someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another, and then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without, like, because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me like, it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to, but like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there is no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. But ultimately in at number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis! And finally, in at number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a Springlock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a Springlock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a Springlock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting springlocked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who was revealed to be William, has scars from a previous Springlock failure from before he becomes Springtrap in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat.